This morning, we continue our conversation on the connection between our economy and crime here in Tobago. Now, for a number of you, you may be a bit overwhelmed with the fact that for weeks on end, we have had to have the difficult conversation regarding the increase of crime and violence here on our lovely, what we used to call peaceful island of Tobago. Now, there are many theorists, economists, and other financial and economic analysts who have made a direct connection in the past between the low economic growth and progress and the increase in crime. This morning, that and a number of other things, I will be chatting with Mr. or political analyst, Dr. Winford James. Good morning, Dr. James, and welcome.
Chanel, is this Chanel right in front of me here?
Yes, yes, yes.
Alex, how are you doing? I am fine this morning. How are you doing?
I am doing quite well, I must say. Now, as I indicated before, there are a number of economists, a number of political theorists, and just persons who have in the past made a direct connection between a lack of economic growth and progress and the rise in crime. Even at the United Nations, they would have spoken about it before. Do you think that the rise in crime that we are seeing here in Tobago can be attributed to low economic growth and progress?
Well, listen. First of all, I wasn't coming on this program to talk economics, but I will answer your question. And to answer your question is that Tobago's economy is the way it is not because of crime, but because the economy itself has not been developed. We haven't had a lot of enterprise. We haven't had money in our votes, in our budgets, to execute development projects for the economic development of the island. We don't want to make the mistake of saying because now we are having more crime in Tobago over the last, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that all of a sudden it is the crime that is responsible for the lack of economic growth or the low economic growth. That is a feature of the Tobagonian economy, right? We are a state sponsored economy. Most of the monies that we have in Tobago comes from government. And of course, we know that our government in Tobago has not been given the resources, the financial resources to help stimulate development progress in the island. So let's be clear about that. But we must not um, trivialize the effect of crime on the island. I mean, if people are closing their shops, I don't know the exact effects of the crime, but I imagine some people are shutting themselves in and are not as confident to open their doors and so on as they used to be. But I don't know that the research has been done to find out, well, what what is the effect of these 18, 19 murders that we have had so far? What is the effect of the multiple murders we had recently in Black Rock? I don't know that that research has been done, but I imagine it has had some effect on the freedom with which people open their doors for business. Is that okay?
Yes, no problem. But this morning we are also chatting a bit about that change that we heard the Prime Minister announced not too long ago while he was at that PNM special convention. He
Right.
indicated that one of the changes that we would be seeing is the fact that they are going to change some of the graphics on that the coat of arms. He indicated that those three ships would be replaced by the steel pan. What are some of your opinions on that?
Well, we are talking about a constitution reform committee that was given a task to do and that has come up with a report. And there was a press conference And according to the report, the Prime Minister identified 3 areas of that report which he thought he should pay attention to. One of them is 2 terms for the Prime Minister and, of course, controlled tenure for other ministers. That's one of them. A second one is proportional representation, which apparently has been presented in such a way as to make us think that proportional representation has some kind of benefit. Anyhow, the Prime Minister identified proportional representation to say that he is not going to allow that. He also, with respect to the 2 terms, he identified it in order to say no 2 terms. And there was another one that I am not remembering now. The point I'm making here was a big report, over 200 pages. And the reports from the media highlight those 3 areas. Ah, yes, the removal of the coat of arms was the other one. So we have a situation where we have a 200-page report, and the Prime Minister jumps in and says, these 3 areas is what I am going to be focusing on for now. Maybe there are other things. And the question that arises for me is, why do you identify those 3? There are a number of recommendations coming from the committee. And if you don't want to say recommendation, a number of proposals coming from that committee, and the Prime Minister identifies 3 of them, if the press reports are accurate, and people like you will have to correct me if there were other foci that the Prime Minister had which were not reported. But it seems to me kind of strange, because I've read the whole report, and there are hundreds. Well, maybe not. I'm I'm overdoing that now, but there are many proposals in the report, and I cannot understand why the focus is on those 3 things. Now, to answer the question, with respect to the ships, the coat of arms, the revision, the redesign of the coat of arms is long overdue. But the question that arises for me is, why now? The Prime Minister is in his 10th year now, or almost his 10th. He certainly has almost finished his 9th. Why now are you focused on the coat of arms? And we want to find out, I want to find out, how much would it cost to redesign the coat of arms? And is the Prime Minister concerned about the cost of it in relation to poverty in the country? Is that a pressing matter? And if it is a pressing matter, he must show us how it is a pressing matter. You follow what I'm trying to say here,
De-
Miss
de-
Felix?
Definitely, because when we look at even changing the coat of arms, it comes with a number of implications. It means that all those monograms and all those logos for the ministries, as well as even the Trinidad and Tobago currency, may need to change again as a result of this change. And we have seen in the past that the currency has been changed, the design of the dollar has
Yeah.
been changed several times over the past 10 years.
But those are
So
only procedural matters. These things will have to be done, right? To make sure now that the transition to the pan in lieu of the 3 ships, that transition occurs as smoothly and as painlessly and as professionally as possible. That will happen. You remember when we had to change some of the monies the paper monies that we have been using? That took a little while. We had to use up the current monies or the old monies, if you wish, until we were given a timeline by which to use up the money or give it into the central bank, and then we could begin using the new monies. These are procedural matters. The question here, I suppose, there was a reason for the prime minister changing the dollar bills or getting the central bank so to do. But we are talking here of something that relates to our independence. We are talking about something that relates to how we brand ourselves, although we have not been using the current coat of arms to brand ourselves, but how we identify internationally through the coat of arms. This has to do with national pride and things of that kind. My question is, why this timing? Why time it for now? Now, next year we are going to have elections, right? We are going to have parliamentary elections next year, and we are going to have House of Assembly elections next year. Is there a connection between the elections that are coming and the focus on the change of arms, which is a matter of national pride?
But
Because
Dr. James, do you think that the Trinidad and Tobago population of voters are concerned or even moved by the fact that the Prime Minister made a change to the coat of arms? Do you think that would be it, that in the grand scheme of things, even if there were a connection there, that the voters would care about something like that?
of course, once you politicize it, when you go up and down the country and you put the idea before people's mind, they will give it thought. But if you're asking whether, in terms of priorities, the coat of arms, the change, the redesign of the coat of arms is something that people consider seriously, the answer is no. People don't consider that. People are more concerned about bread and butter issues, yeah? And they can't see how you can spend all that money. And I say all that money because we don't know how much money is going to be involved. But we certainly do know that it's going to cost a lot. And people are going to judge the government by its focus on this coat of arms business that relates to colonialism and post colonialism and national pride. They're going to judge the prime minister on his timing, on his prioritization of the design of the coat of arms. They're going to judge him, how he went about giving priority to this matter when there were other matters that were more serious and more immediately important to the well-being of the country. When you talk to people, that's what they tell you, by the way. These are not my original ideas. People tell you, what is the importance of that here? Does that put food on my table? Does that help me, feed my children? That is those who live below the poverty line and so on. There are some people, of course, who will not bother with that, also because or either they understand that if you're going to build a country, there are other things to talk about. But I want to say this, Shenell, as an important consideration. Here is a committee that has presented its report to the Prime Minister, right? Here they are in a press conference. And the Prime Minister, he may have done it before, but certainly he takes a decision or for dissemination in the press conference. And that position that he has taken is to call for or to state that he is going to change the design of the coat of arms. He's going to resist. He's certainly against the proportional representation idea that I referred to before, and the limits for the prime minister in office. The question is, who else were involved in this matter? Who took that decision? Was that a democratic decision? I know the cabinet is given the power by 75(1) of the Constitution to be in charge of generally what happens in the country, how the country develops, what laws and so on. I understand that. But what I'm asking you to consider, Chanel, is whether, for example, the House of Assembly was involved in that decision making, or we were just recipients of the Prime Minister's authoritarianism. You understand the point?
Totally understood. But we are going to take a break right here and then we'll be back right after this. See you soon as we continue this conversation. Morning and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago. I have been chatting with Dr. Winford James, and we have been chatting a bit about the proposal for the change of the coat of arms by the Prime Minister. Good morning and welcome back, Dr. James.
Right.
So a number
But
of
the last
persons.
point I made, I want you to just go back to it. I was trying to get you to understand that the Prime Minister's focus on the three things I identified is an expression of his authoritarian outlook on government. Obviously, I'm not saying that what he has done there is illegal, far from it. But the Constitution authorizes him to do what he did. But those of us who want more democracy will decry that method that he continues to use. So he tells us, look, I will get the coat of arms redesigned. I will not permit the idea of two terms for the prime minister. I will not do this and I will not. But he's focused on those three things. And the question is whether we, given the fact that he has a constitutional reform committee that is acting on to get information out to the public and so on, or to inform the government as to how to go forward. The question is that the kind of democracy we want? So that you have a Tobago House of Assembly and all that it can do in the face of the Prime Minister's declarations is just sit back and receive the Prime Minister's authoritarian content. I think that's an important point. And of course, I also said there are many other recommendations or proposals in the report that, from the reports in the press, he doesn't seem to have paid any attention to.
Many persons are saying that they believe that the recommendation should have come directly from the committee members of that constitutional reform committee instead of the Prime Minister making that revelation or disclosing such recommendation on his political platform. How do you feel about that?
The minister did not. I don't. There wasn't a proposal from the committee with respect to the coat of arms. What the report seems to have said, or seems to be saying, is that when the committee went abroad, went across the country, they received that idea from some people, so that the committee was merely reporting what it received from various quarters. The Prime Minister seized upon that recommendation from the report. That is a recommendation from people who you talk to, right? So the Prime Minister seizes upon that to say, well, this is what I am focused on. And that is a troubling matter because there are so many more matters and more pressing matters in the report than a mention of that idea, of that recommendation as coming from the public as that committee went about the country.
We have seen conversations rising regarding the pan versus the tassa and what's more Trinbagonian. Did you perceive something like this coming out of a proposed change on the coat of arms?
Yes, because it's there's cultural competition in the country, right? There's cultural competition from the Afros, and there's cultural competition from the Indos. So this is predictable that people are going to say, well, if you're going to honor the steel pan, give if you're going to favor the steel pan, which is an Afro thing, why can't you favor also the Indian instrument? And so we expect that. But I don't wish to go into a defense of the pan as a national instrument. A lot has been written about that, and I think the arguments are quite strong. But I don't want to spend my time on something that I regard as quite trivial in the context of all the other matters that need discussion. You follow? So, but I do land when I want to, if I were to be pressed to say uh, whether the pan is a national instrument and the sitar is not. I want you to know, Ms. Felix, that I favor the steel pan as the national instrument. But I am not prepared to go into a defense of it at this time because I think it's a sideshow. I also feel it might be a distraction, right? Um, the Prime Minister had an opportunity to say, well, look, this committee that I have set us have come up with a number of proposals and they have laid it out, and we can now, the public can go through what they have come up with and give their views again, because apparently there is going to be some settlement of certain ideas that the committee has come up with. And that speaks to methodology. What do you do with proposals that come from the committee based on the committee's own ideas and based on what um, the committee's what the committee is reporting as proposals from the public?
They are the persons who have, made their comments and added to the conversation by saying that the removal of Columbus's ships can be akin to trying to sanitize history. What do you feel about that?
No, man. Sanitization of history? No. The people who are calling for the redesign of the coat of arms are not saying that they are calling for it because they want to deny that Columbus came here and there was a Spanish government in the country, especially in Port of Spain, a Spanish government that has named some of the streets in Port of Spain and so on. They're not saying that. They're not saying that at all. That we are sanitizing. What they are saying is that in the attempt to achieve more independence, more local identification with the way we name places, with the kinds of remedies we are proposing for the harm that colonization has done to Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the Caribbean and other parts of the world also. They're saying that this is something that has to be done. That is not sanitization. What they're saying at the time has come, and I agree that the time has come, but they're saying that the time has come for us to, among other things, redo the coat of arms. Um, and the coat of arms came in not because of our own efforts at all. Other people came up with the coat of arms. And if we are going to be um, um, robustly engaged in the formation of our national personality and so on, then that's one of the things that we have to do. But that cannot by any stretch of the imagination be regarded as sanitization, because it's not as if you are bound to keep what the colonial masters, all that the colonial masters have come up with. The question is the timing. The timing.
Right.
Why not?
We also heard the Prime Minister indicating that there was that joint select, or there is actually that joint select committee whose responsibility it is to look at the Tobago autonomy bill, and that even that change is the beginning of an overall push towards constitutional change. But do you think that this current administration is doing enough to continue to advance the cause for Tobago's autonomy and put sufficient pressure on the central government to get that bill passed?
Well, remember the central government came two bills: the self-government constitutional amendment bill 2021, also the Tobago Island government bill. There are two bills. They put that before the population in the House of Assembly elections, and the PNM government was rejected. So we have to ask ourselves, what's the importance of the Tobagonian electorate rejection of the Prime Minister's promotion of those bills? What this is a political matter. If you come before the population, as is in Tobago, you first of all you get the number of seats extended by three. You go up to 50, and you have a party that is not favored by the government. You have that party winning 14 of the 15 seats. And if it is true, as it must be true, that the government campaigned on the two bills that they put before the Tobagonian electorate, then there must be some consequences. And those consequences have not been itemized enough to the satisfaction of the Tobagonian electorate. And what is more is that the Constitution Commission, the Constitution Review Committee, went back to those bills, right, and examined examined some of the ideas in them, at least, maybe all the ideas, but they have relied on what the content of those bills, and of course they cherry picked the ideas that they would like to present to the government and of course to the population. So that bill is before the Joint Select Committee, and I imagine that the report of that committee is going to go to that Joint Select Committee as well. But what I'm trying to say here is that the Constitution Review Committee went to those two bills and examined, so they claim, and examined the content of those bills and have come up with some recommendations based in part on their examination of the bills before the Joint Select Committee. So the question is, I don't know right now what is the attitude in the government with respect to further Joint Select Committee examination of ideas, because ideas are going to come. Remember too that one of the outcomes of the press conference, and of course it's in the report as well. One of the outcomes is that the government wants to hold a conference. In fact, it was part of the task that they had, that is the committee, that they were supposed to plan or help government plan for a conference on some of the things that are in that report, and all of which we have been talking about here, Ms. Felix. So that is coming up, and in fact, it's overdue, it's late, and it might be coming up in November if things are ready. But there is a conference that is coming up, and the continuing input of the JSC will be part, I imagine, of the agenda of the government when that conference comes along.
All
But the
right. I want to ask, our viewers to make sure that they add their comments and add their perspectives here on in the conversation. Let us know if you think that the change in the coat of arms from Columbus's ships to the steel pan, do you think that it would have any serious implications? Do you support it? And do you think that it is the right move? But before you do that, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to be back right after this. I look forward to seeing your comments. Good morning, and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. I have been chatting with Dr. Winford James, and before we were talking a bit about, a small connection, whether or not there was a small connection between crime and economics, as we see an increase in crime happening here in Tobago. And we also discussed extensively the implications of that change in the coat of arms that was proposed by the Constitutional Reform Committee, or included in that report, and then, publicly discussed by the Prime Minister. But as we wrap up this morning's discussion, Dr. James, I want to talk to you a bit about where Tobago is in relation to raising alternative forms of capital. I know that you were a part of that venture capital board. Where are we with that?
Well, I'm not so sure about the question. Are you asking what about the contribution of venture capital or the venture capital company to business development in Tobago?
To raising any sort of capital to assist with economic development here in Tobago. Now, we know that the main source of funding for Tobago, as you would have indicated previously, is from the central government. And
But
one of the things that we have been trying to do is, get capital from other sources to help with some of the economic growth and progress on the island. How has the venture capital fund help to contribute to that economic development in Tobago? Where are we
well,
with that?
first of all, I'm no longer there.
Okay.
But when I was there, the company depended on a subvention from the government, from that is to say, the House of Assembly. So the company asked the House of Assembly for help, financial subvention, as I said, to use in part for the formation of new venture capital companies. Because, it's partner financing that is taking place, or that was partially the intent of those who framed the legislation relating to venture capital. So when I was there, we were not we had to deal with applicants who had fallen into debt trouble and who were seeking to have assistance, to take them out of the problems that they had. And by the time that I left, that had not yet happened. So while it is true that venture capital relies on, partially of course, assistance from other businesses that see that that's a way to advance the entrepreneurship goals of people in the population, that had not yet happened because of the great focus on a number of businesses, a number of proposals, a number of companies had fallen into distress. And so there was an attempt to help them overcome the problems that they were faced with. You do know, Shenell, that the House of Assembly is very interested in a development bank. And that idea, of course, came in the budget for the new period. It is there. And the question is that the House of Assembly is thinking of providing guarantees to those people who are looking for financing. And the House of Assembly is saying, look, um, we are going to guarantee um, that this is the case. This is what we want to see happening. But I don't know that the idea of having the Tobago Development Company, um, business development company, I don't know that that has reached the point where it's now formal policy, except of course policy as it appears in the budget. What I'm saying here is that um, the thing has not been formalized to the extent that there are applications um, for funds, um, which will then be guaranteed by the Tobago House of Assembly.
But when it comes to venture capital, isn't that supposed to be funded by independent private sector institutions who want to make an investment into businesses in Trinidad, well, in Tobago particularly? So
Well,
how does the model work when we have the
a matter of
THA?
it's a matter of your model. There are different kinds of models across the world, right? The model that we inherited is a model where the state was becoming partners with entrepreneurs and of providing um, technical expertise to entrepreneurs who wanted to put down a business in Tobago. Um, so I am not aware of many people who have come in to say, look, we are going to partner with venture capital to get your business going, and we are going to guarantee your monies once you invest with us. We're going to guarantee that you'll be repaid if you do wish to opt out. Now, I don't know that that has happened just yet in any widespread kind of way.
Right. And how do we treat with the fact that there are still a number of entrepreneurs and businesses in Tobago that are not aware of the type of service that is provided by the venture capital
Well, I
company?
don't know that they ought to know. I think venture has been about for some time. But to go back to the meat of the question, how do you treat with people who want to do business but don't have the capital to do so, right? Is that the question? They want to put down business, but they don't have enough capital to do so, so they are appealing to the state for help. Is that what you're asking, Shenell?
No, I was indicating the fact that although the company exists, there's still a number of businesses here on the island that don't know that this is an avenue for them to receive funding.
But it means that we have to, in the company, we have to advertise. We have to make our business known to the community, right? So, and that's how that goes. We have to advertise and market the what we want to do, what we are set up to do, and what we can do, and how entrepreneurs can get involved in that process and be helped if they think that what they encounter um, is sufficient for them to put their business down. Um, Sometimes you find people are asking for sums that the venture capital company does not have, simply doesn't have it because there is not enough equity um, in the company's business to distribute in a way that would satisfy the applicants for help. So it's not an easy thing.
And are there any plans in the future to maybe diversify the model to allow possibly members of the diaspora or other international investors to begin to invest money into that fund to allow for a wider array of businesses to receive the type of startup capital that
Yeah,
they need?
that's a great question, and that's a great idea. I don't know that these things have materialized, but they certainly exist at the level of ideas in the company's portfolio, right? So those ideas are there, but the materialization of the ideas, I don't think has occurred. But remember, as I said to you, I'm no longer there.
Okay.
You would have to find out um, who are the people who are there and probably get an interview with them because
All
they may
right.
have gone on in areas that were not there when I was there. So you have Mrs. Mary Ann Leons, who is the current chair of the company. You probably can seek to have a conversation with her, but she is the new chairperson.
Right. And when you were there, what were some of the hindrances for the implementation of these type of ideas?
But we didn't have enough money, first of all, and we didn't have proposals that were well put together. So we had to invite experts to provide assistance in terms of technical assistance in terms of how you go forward with your business. Um, yeah, so we had experts that we employed, we hired to guide the implementation of particular proposals. Those um, experts were coming in just a few months ago, and they were given their task, and I don't know whether they have reported or anything of the kind. But the proposals, some proposals, maybe all of them, were not properly done, and certainly they didn't have enough money. But we couldn't, given a particular history, we couldn't give the help that these people were asking for because we didn't have, first of all, a proposals that were uh, robust, well
Right.
developed, and we
And,
didn't
and, and,
have.
and moving forward, do you recommend or think that the company should focus on getting those international investors here, to invest
That's a
in
good
the fund?
focus.
Huh?
I think that's a good focus. I said it before. Yeah, it's a good focus. Go to the diaspora and try to interest people to get involved as equity partners in venture capital and distributing that money among proposals. Once the proposals um, were taken care of, were you know they were done properly, restructuring proposals to make sure that there was comfort in those who were coming in to help.
All right, excellent. And even as we wrap up this morning's discussion, is there anything that you want to leave us with this morning as we head off?
Yeah, as the what?
I said as we
Oh,
close
you
off
head
the
off. Yeah.
conversation.
Yes, Chanel, I want to re-emphasize the point that we must move from a focus on sideshows, political sideshows, to really deep focus on the things that we need to have more democracy in the island and in the country as a whole. And I said it to you before that there are deeper ideas in the proposals of the committee that have not been discussed by the public. I can give you several of them, and I'll give you only one. The role of the president. There are proposals to renovate the office of the presidency, meaning to say the role of the presidency in our constitution. Yeah? And matters like that have not been discussed. And while I agree that coat of arms is important, I do not understand why it is coming now. I do not see the importance of it at this point of our history. I do not see the importance of this thing in the context of elections coming next year and so on and so on and so on. Right? There are many things, for example, like the definition of the two islands. Right now, there's a proposal coming from the report that talks about an 11-mile radius from the low baselines and so on outwards. It currently it is 6. It is 6 nautical miles. Now, uh, what has reared its head in the report is 11 miles, and there's no discussion of matters that are serious like that. Because you see, when we settle these matters, we then understand that there is more sea in our two islands. There's more sea than there is land, and that if you go northwestwards of the country, that will be northwestwards of Tobago, you'll find Tobago having more maritime um, resources than is the case now, because Tobago is not seen as as part of the, well, it's not seen as being separable from the country at this point in time. And,
Right.
and all of that is part of it. How do you define Trinidad? Do you define Tobago? And what are the consequences for how Tobago is funded in the budget? Matters like that are far more serious than the removal of, that the redesign, as I like to say, than the redesign of the coat of arms. That's a sideshow, and I'm not denying that it is necessary to do so. The question is whether the government is the right set of persons to do so, and whether it could not be done away from the imminency of elections next year.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Winford. Great point that you raised there. Totally agree that the conversation regarding Tobago is extremely important and one that should have maybe been prioritized even above changes in the coat of arms. But unfortunately,
Most
we have to wrap up this morning's discussion, and we want to thank you for giving us your time this morning and for, always being available to us here at Tobago Updates. Guys, we want to thank you so much for, joining the conversation. Thanks you for your likes, your shares, and your comments. And if you would like, you can continue to follow me on all social media platforms at Shenell Felix and see everything that's happening behind the scenes. Again, have a great day.
It's a brand new